Yes, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm okay.
Yes, yes. It is. It is not. Uh, it is unstable situation. So
I I agree. I've been saying this, you know me, I think attitude is very important and choosing to be happy is very important, so I will do that. And it kind of sucks out there in the world right now. You know, it doesn't feel good.
yes, yes. It is weird thing. We are living to see such weird behavior. Yes.
And I think for me, part of it too is I don't know, you know, because we have this mentally ill person as the president, we talk about him being crazy instead of talking about so many people dying, Osama, so much death.
Yes. Yes.
It's so painful, you know, it's so painful.
Yes. Yes. He is not. Uh, he is not in parallel with the situation of the
Yes,
nation of the people.
yes.
He is he is drawn down in his ego, his selfishness. Yes, yeah. God help, God help, really.
I know, I'm with you. God help him, God help us. I agree completely.
Hello,
Hey, Hiroe. Hey, Jay.
good day. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. Osama
With
and I were talking.
all the political battles.
Well, not even I don't even care anymore, Hiroe, but it's just we were saying mostly the politics stuff is so sad because we talk about politics instead of how many people are dying in the country, and
Oh,
that just makes me
yes,
sad. We're distracted. We're focused on the wrong stuff, I think.
I agree with you. I agree with you that they are playing with our lives.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I think that's it. I think that's it. And I think for me, just I am, you know, whatever, what is this, since March? So in 7 or 8 months or 9 months or whatever, I am. It's just some days I'm very happy that it's just me and I'm alone, and other days I'm like, oh my God, it's just me, I'm alone. Like this
It's
weekend was
been
one
an
of those.
awful year for everyone. I think
I
mentally, it's
agree.
really
Yeah.
like a test. You know.
Yeah. This weekend it was finally like, oh, I'm kind of sad and lonely this weekend. I don't feel good, you know?
Yeah, and the weather starts. You know, it's even harder.
Yeah, I'm happy for rain, but yeah, it's hard that it's cold and it's like dark. Yesterday it was dark at like 3:30 in the afternoon.
That's
But,
right. That's
but
right.
the rain is good. But the rain is good for my beautiful state, so that's good.
But we should always look at the bright side of the life. So, you know, we are not in Alaska, we have still sun.
True. I know. It's true. I was saying that to Usama before you got here too. Attitude is everything. Just
Yes, exactly.
sometimes it's easier than other times, you know.
Yes, yes. But we made it through so far, you know, last 8 months or 9 months. Why not another 6 months?
Let's do it. We have no choice.
Exactly, exactly.
And we only have what, 3 weeks left, I think, for the semester. That's the other thing is everybody's so tired and everybody
Oh,
feels
gosh, unbelievable the time. Flies.
everyone everyone feels so done. Even before last week, like I've been talking to other faculty, to other professors, and they're like, "So are your students tired?" And I was like, "Dude, we're done. Everyone is done. It's just
No, no, no. Oh, come on. We are just getting into the groove.
here we go. Just getting into the groove."
Yeah, it's just in the groove.
Man, I think you're the only one here.
No, no, I don't think so. Look at it. Everyone is laughing. So
Hey, if you've got energy, I respect and admire you. I'm tired. I don't know about you guys. I'm tired. Hey, Natan. Hey, Ahmad.
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm okay. I'm here. I'm surviving. I finally got to finish some grading stuff and I got to hear for people who are not done with this, don't worry, but getting to listen to your poems. Oh my God, that made me so happy this weekend. So I was grading, I finished this morning so I could open up the grades. But it was just so beautiful. So that made me very happy. Thank you all. That was really spectacular.
Professor, about the paraphrasing assignment, you
Hmm.
told us to postpone this period. Because of that, I I postponed it. So can I resubmit it?
Yeah.
Because yeah, okay, good.
You know me, Osama. I don't care about due dates.
Okay.
You guys have enough due dates in your other classes, and I have enough. We all have enough. Well, we'll see who's here today, but how are you guys? How are you guys? So I've talked a lot. Ahmad, Jay, anybody want to share how you guys are doing? What's going on? Week 13, how's life? What's up?
I'm kind of in survival mode still, but it's getting better.
Good. You feel, how's
Yeah.
your health? You feel better?
Yes,
Well,
yes.
you
I
feel
feel a lot
like
better.
100% or
Around 80.
okay, I'll take it. Cool. How about you, Jay? Anything? How you doing? How's life?
Good. How are you?
Yeah.
I feel like everyone's just that. Like,
Yeah. It's scary. I think the COVID stuff is scary to me, like how bad it is, how it's the worst. You know, America's been not great, and now it's the worst it's ever been in America. So that's scary. That freaks me out a little bit.
I'm actually just glad because Trump is going like out of the office pretty
Please, God.
soon,
I hope. I hope.
and like Biden's already having his own like agenda and stuff. So I'm just looking forward to the new president compared to like this one.
I'm with you. That's what I was saying to Usama. I hope the greatest gift from God would be I don't have to talk about this man anymore. I don't want to talk about him. I don't want to see his face. I don't want to hear his voice. I'm so tired of this crazy person. I am sick of him. So I hope, yeah, I hope in January we get a break. We deserve it, I think.
Everyone's tired of him.
Not everybody. Oh my God. On Saturday, I went to when they announced the election, I went to the Capitol and there were lots of people happy and celebrating. But then by the afternoon, 300 people with their Trump flags and trucks and screaming and yelling, and they're still so angry and they're so hateful. And Joe Biden is a child molester. And it's crazy. I mean, it's another reality. You know, we're living in different realities now, and I don't know how we fix it. I don't know. I know. Yeah. Anyway, I know. Yeah. Not. I. We. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I think the media needs to change a lot here in USA. I've never seen those biased in both ways. Yeah, exactly. All about money, right? Maybe Trump is coming back with a new media station, right?
Yeah. I mean, he could. I mean, you know, he could sell whatever he wants to the people who love him. It sure seems that way, huh?
Yeah,
Me money. Give me money to fight to go to court to fight. You know what I mean? And
exactly. All about money and power. Every country,
yeah,
right?
that's true. America's just
That's
got
why education is the key.
public education, it's not cheap, but cheap, you know, for us, the cheapest higher education.
Affordable.
Yeah, more affordable. Yes, that is definitely a good thing. It's why this is my career. I'm with you here. I totally
Okay.
agree.
So we all are on the right track here.
Yes, I'm not worried about you guys. I'm not worried about you guys. America, I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried.
Well, America has a system to rectify itself. Yes,
We'll
yes,
see.
I believe in this.
Well, on good days I still do. On bad days I get nervous, Usama.
Yes, sure.
Me too, me too. But I say, my country, we survived the atomic bomb, so we can get over this too.
That's true. Good point. That's why I love working with you guys instead of spoiled Americans. It's like, yeah, that's very true. I thought about Osama a lot. I mean, I know you've seen crazy dictators, and you've seen. I mean, Osama, I know you've been through way worse. Yeah. All right. we'll get going today. Any questions just about the class or about stuff? I know that the poetry project, I have 5. When do we need to submit today? What format of this work? Oh, I'm reading Natalia's question. Natalia asks, I have questions about the project that we need to submit today. What is the format of this work? Should we follow the usual academic organization of essays, including introduction, body, and conclusion? Or can we just write in the form of blocks of answers to the separate 2 questions that you asked? In your document, you did it this way. Oh yeah, so the video that I made, and hopefully some of you guys watched, it was to show you, Natalia, do it in blocks like that. I don't need an organized full essay. You know, you don't need a full, literary analysis. Think of this project as something between an essay and a journal entry. Do you know what I mean? Like I want you to more than the structure of this type of writing, I want you to practice doing poetic analysis, which again, another thing that, when I was feeling good and happy this weekend, listening to your poems, you guys were doing this, right? Just on this line, the author says this in the 3rd stanza, that this image, I mean, that's all I'm asking you guys to do. And Hero is talking about the video. So it sounds like, Natalia, you already saw it, but for people who, did people watch it? Was it helpful if you guys watched it? Again, I'm just trying stuff since we're all doing this online thing for the first time. Usama says thumbs up. Anybody, just quick thought, like, was it good? Was it helpful? Because I'm doing this next semester. So yes, Ahmad.
It was really helpful, but on the other way, because the poetic analysis, as much as I know, I am not so professional on that one.
Yeah.
There's different formats, as Natalia said. I mean, if it's okay, I can share what I wrote. I just want to show the format, Professor, and see if that format is working.
Sure, I'm going to let me change my settings. Yep. Okay, you can share. Or you should be able to.
Okay, let me see which one I'm going with. Yep. Do you guys see it?
Yes.
I just put kind of small subtitles on each response. Is that okay, or should I remove those ones?
Yeah, scroll down. Already, to me, right away, the formatting looks great. So, yeah, so there's your response, simile and metaphor.
I have simile and metaphor. People maybe have something different. Those
Yeah,
are the
this looks great. This is totally appropriate. And I see some talking about the rhymes and the rhythms. Absolutely. This is 100% fine and great for this assignment, Ahmad. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Professor.
Of course. So Natalia was saying when, yeah, I didn't put a time. I'm not too worried about it. I saw only 5 people have submitted theirs, I think. So I don't know. I just think it's cold and slow and scary in the world. So I think we're all most of us are going kind of slow. So today, basically as soon as you can, Natalia. I know that's not a specific answer, but by midnight, I can be very clear and scary, but the sooner the better. Because I also think for you guys now, be done. I've done online classes too. It doesn't feel good when you have like 7 things hanging over your head to do. So just be done. Whatever you got is good. Whatever you've got is good. Any other questions about homework from the past, assignments, anything that's not, because today I'm going to introduce literature and fiction, and I'm going to introduce the book. So anything about the past, I'm ready.
It's Natasha. So you haven't graded my first paper narrative, and I already submit second one, so I didn't wait for your grade. So is it okay?
Smart. Yeah, that was smart considering how slow I am right now. Yes, that's very smart.
Yeah, because but the Canvas says me it's too late or something, late assignment. I don't know. Is it late? Not late?
No. As you can probably tell, I mean, I haven't taken points from anybody in this class for anything being late at any time. So again, I'm not really worried about due dates and late or not late, Natasha.
Okay. Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Questions about the past? Questions about anything for the class that's not new stuff? Because I've got new stuff today.
Should we about the next assignment?
I'm going to introduce the book today, Ahmad, and then I'm still thinking about we only have 3 weeks. Like, I think that instead of doing one big, huge assignment, I'm going to do 2 or 3 lessons in Canvas, but they'll be like 50 points or 100-point lessons instead of like a 5-page paper. We can talk about that more next week, but really, honestly, when you think about the time you have for this class, what I would love is that you spend the time reading this book and then be ready to talk about it with me, because it's a lot to be reading and then, you know, whatever, I'm picking a number out of my head, right? But 10 hours to read and then 10 hours to write. I honestly feel like I'd rather we do 20 hours of reading and talk about it. So we'll see. I want to see how it goes today and talk to you guys and see how you're feeling. But I think I'd rather do that, which is do 2 smaller assignments. If students want to do more, like if you want to write and practice literary analysis, you can do that for these type of Canvas lessons I'm imagining. But that's where my head is at now. Does that make sense, Safan?
Yes, thank you.
How does this sound to everybody? Do a little bit less. I keep thinking there's 3 or 4 students in this class who go very fast. And I was like that when I was a student too. I was like, I want to do more. I want to do more. I'm always worried about the students who want to do more. But I have this feeling of like life is kind of slowing down right now. And I think it's appropriate to do that. And like I said, I was talking to other students in the lab because I work in the lab, and they're like, oh my God, Jeff, like, I feel like some of our teachers would slow down at the end, but it's like almost even more work at the end, like more tests and more finals and stuff. So I'm like, okay, we could take a break. Natalia also said in the question, should we write about all the poetic elements or can we choose only some of them? Yes, you can choose any of the ones you want, Natalia. If you didn't do consonants or assonants, that is totally fine. Whatever is the most meaningful to you. Don't forget your chamarra. It's raining out there. Chamarra is jacket. Chamarra is raincoat. Yes. So Natalia, choose what you want to analyze. You don't have to analyze everything.
Professor?
Yes.
If we chose a different poem, do we have to include it on the paper?
No. If you chose a different poem, I'll just see if I can. Did you find it online, Jay?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I can find it online, not a problem at all.
I actually just included it just to make sure.
Well, that makes my life easy, so thank you. That's fine. You get some extra words in the word count, you know.
I didn't include it though.
No, I know you would.
I was thinking about it.
Believe me, I've been teaching writing long enough. I know that it's like, ooh, 1,000 words. Okay, I'll quote the book, but it's like, 2 paragraphs of quote. There's like 300 words, 300 of my words for my paper, and that quote that I just put in. Yeah, I know for you guys, that's not really a problem. No problem, Natalia. My absolute pleasure, and thank you. Excellent questions. Okay, last call. Any other questions before we talk about literature and before I introduce you to what is truly, I swear to God, one of my favorite books in the world. Yeah, you've got an older copy with that old cover, Letty. I love it. Any other questions before we talk about literature? Let's go. I'm going to share my screen. All right, today's November 18th. Announcements. Actually, I don't have any announcements. We just sort of talked about them. I guess I could say again, I'm almost there, you guys. I'm almost caught up on grading. I think everything except the paper and the midterm are done. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there soon. That's my short little announcement. So today we're just going to talk about fiction, and we're going to talk about what's coming up. So the elements of fiction that I want to introduce today, and a lot of the things we've already talked about and that you've already written about so beautifully in your translated poetry lesson, and that I'm sure that I get to read about in your poetry papers. A lot of those same elements in terms of thinking about how language is used, the structure of language, the organization of language, the way that it feels and flows together. Some of those things really are connected to literature, right? Because, this book, The Lathe of Heaven, it's not like a poem. It's not intended to be read out loud, every single word, But of course, the difference between a newspaper article and literature, right, is the style of the writing. There definitely are sort of poetic elements, or the author's choosing specific words based on things like rhythm and tone and stress and all those different things that we introduced with poetry. So we've already talked about some of these elements from poetry. The other thing you see down here, so I'm going to talk today briefly about setting, character, point of view, metaphor, simile, image, and symbol. These are sort of things we've talked about and introduced with poetry. And you'll see in this book, because the author of this book is also a poet, so you get some of that kind of poetic symbol and imagery in this text. But the last thing on the list is theme, right? And we talked about theme quite a lot when we were talking about the narratives. So I'm not going to talk too much more about theme today, because it's basically the same thing, right? The idea is theme, like I've said it to you guys about literary or about personal narratives, was, so what? Like, what's the point of this story, right? Why are we telling this story? What's the meaning of all these stories put together? And that's what I mean when I talk about theme. So that's what we're going to introduce today, and then we're going to look at the book together a little bit. So first, setting is pretty basic things. You probably already know this from either other literature classes, or even if you've ever studied film or TV shows. The setting is basically when and where a story takes place. So this means that they're setting in both terms of the big picture, right? So let's say there's a book, and that book, it takes place in San Francisco, right? Okay, so the whole book is in San Francisco. That's part of the setting. But also in the small picture, well, at one chapter, one moment, one scene takes place in a hotel room in San Francisco, right? That's all part of the setting as well. And then finally, the year of the story is also very important. If you're looking about historical fiction, this is becoming much more common and much more popular now, that people who study, you know, a culture, a city, a time, a place 200 years ago, well, then they'll set that story in that time frame, right? So the year of the story is very important, and it's going to be connected to, of course, the actions and the events, the things that take place in the story. So setting is basically, like I said, when and where. And it's very simple and easy to understand, I think. But when you start to analyze or look at a story or a book, you'll see, you know, there's a lot of different settings, even in one book, you know, different scenes, different moments taking place at different times. Even if it all happens in one city or one state or one country, for example. We'll talk about more of this. Today, I'm going to introduce the setting for The Lathe of Heaven and talk about why setting is important for this book. But before we talk about the specific example, any questions about what setting is? Pretty basic, but any questions? No. Cool. So yeah, setting, when and where. Then there's this important idea of characters. Now, again, we talked about this. I talked about this very, very, very briefly during the poetry. But, you know, in all of the poems that we read, there might be one or more characters, right? There's a character who's telling the poem, who's saying the poem. Maybe that's the author. Maybe that's some character that the author creates. We don't know. But of course, in a story, in a book, there are more characters. So there are sort of more traditional, what could I say, more common types of characters that you see over and over and over again in stories, right? So the most sort of, you know, you could Google a list of, you know, literary characters, and you could get, you know, a list of 30 different examples. But really the four most important types of characters that I want to talk about today and talk about with this book are protagonist, antagonist, foil, and complex characters. So again, you might have heard these words before, but just to introduce them very briefly. The protagonist basically is usually, the way we talk about this, the good guy, right? The protagonist is the character in the story where the central focus of the book is about that character. Now, in many stories, and I'm going to argue that in The Lathe of Heaven, there really is one protagonist. But as you get longer books with more and more details, more and more specific sort of events that happen, you might have 2 or 3 protagonists. But again, usually you get one. Like one example that I always use in classes is, if people have seen The Lion King, you know, either the cartoon, the old Lion King Disney movie, or the new computer Lion King movie, if you guys have kids or you've just seen it, you know, there's a protagonist, right? Simba, like the main lion. The movie's about one main lion, right? There are other good guys around the character, but there's a main protagonist to the story. Then there's, in most stories as well, an antagonist. Now, this is the bad guy in the story. Now, good and bad, I'm being kind of simplistic here, but it's helpful to think about these kind of like opposites as we start to practice these ideas. So the bad guy is usually trying to get in the way or preventing, intentionally or unintentionally. This is important. So the protagonist usually doesn't think they're the bad, or I'm sorry, the antagonist usually doesn't think they're the bad guy. They don't think they're doing anything bad or wrong, but we understand as the reader that they're sort of getting in the way or stopping the main character from doing what they want to do or achieving their goal or whatever it is. So protagonist, good guy; antagonist, bad guy. The protagonist wants to do something, get something done, reach a goal, and the antagonist is getting in the way of that somehow, right? Now, sometimes this could be like, you know, pure good and bad. This could be like big, I don't know, like I was thinking of like fairy tales almost, right? This could be like the hero with the sword and the monster trying to kill the, you know, it could be that simplistic, but of course, it's not always that black and white, right? It's not always just good and evil. Usama, did I see your hand?
Maybe it is something like the kettle of Trump in front of the White House.
I love. Yes.
Yes.
A good example though, because, you know, it's a good example because reality is sort of becoming like literature now. You know, for millions of people, Donald Trump is the protagonist, and for millions of people, he is the antagonist. It's very complex. It's a very complex world we live in, right?
But the majority that consider he is
Yes.
antagonist.
At least in the election, 6 million more people. Yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. I agree.
There is a silent people who doesn't vote also.
I agree.
There is a lot, millions doesn't vote.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. That's like when I hear about that, I think of like what Hiro was saying at the beginning about money and power. I understand sometimes people feel like people have so much money and so much power that we don't have any power ourselves. So I think that hopelessness is a big part of that as well. Now, then we also have characters that might not be the main character, right? So we have this opposite idea. In literature, it's very common to talk about opposites, right? Good and bad, right and wrong, light and dark, up and whatever, as a way to sort of understand and put the characters into context. But just because but that doesn't mean that there's only good and bad for the protagonist and the antagonist. There are also these things called character foils, F-O-I-L. And the idea here is that in some stories, authors will put characters who are foils to create opposites, right? So as it says on the screen, a character that is the opposite of another character. For example, if there's a very brave character in a story, their foil would be a weak or cowardly character. Sometimes the antagonist is the foil to the protagonist, but not always. Forgive me. Yeah, so sometimes the antagonist is a bad guy because they are the foil to the protagonist. They are the opposite, right? The protagonist represents all that is good. The antagonist represents all that is bad. But it's not always the case, you know. Foil is just about opposites, right? Foil is just a way for an author to say, well, here's what a brave character looks like in my world. Here's what a scared character looks like in my world. And then as the reader, we get to sort of compare them and understand what these ideas of bravery and cowardliness mean in the story. Does that make sense? Foils?
Not exactly. More detail.
More details or more examples? Well, we'll see some in the yeah, I mean, I think again, without, I mean, you all know my opinions at this point, but without being like choosing a side about politics, I do think that this election that we just had is kind of an example in the foil, right? Donald Trump, whether you love him or you hate him, his whole point is like to say how great he is, to never back down, never apologize, to be sort of rude and to say whatever he wants. And Joe Biden, his whole campaign was to saying like, I'm a nice person, like I will treat you with respect, whether we agree or disagree. In a certain way, they kind of are opposites, right? They kind of are foils. Now, they are similar too. They're both old and they're both white and they're both men and they have things in common, right? But some of their character traits, the things that they say they believe, the things that they say they want, I really do think they are kind of opposites. And I think that's the reason that some people are really attracted to Donald Trump is they feel like he is strong, right? And that never apologizing or never saying you did anything wrong is strength. And Joe Biden's whole argument was no, like people are in pain, people are suffering. Like I know what it's like. I lost my wife, you know, my wife died and my children died and I've had this tragedy. And I know that you can be compassionate and still be strong at the same time. So in a certain way, that is kind of like a foil, right? They are kind of like character opposites. Yeah, and foil can come about in a lot of different ways. And again, you're going to see this idea of the foil in this book. It's not quite like Donald Trump level, but this idea of strength and weakness is a big theme in this book. What is strength, right? What is weakness? And is violence really strength? You know, because in many societies, this is the idea that if a person is strong or if a person is violent, then that shows they're strong. And this book is really asking some of that question. So think about foil, Usama, as characters who sort of represent opposites. And like I said, for this book, think strength or weakness.
Quick question.
Yes, please, Natasha.
So, for example, you mentioned a Lion King. Everybody knows about this.
Yeah.
So probably the Simba in the beginning, he's a foil, he's a weak, and his father is the main character, I cannot pronounce.
Protagonist.
But no, like protagonist. Yeah, the father is protagonist, and Simba is the more like Scar is like, we know the Scar is the antagonist.
Definitely.
And Simba is a foil in this. He's weak. He betrayed the pride. Something like this. Can it be? Can the main character is changing all the time there? It's not always he's brave or something.
Oh, okay, perfect. You're sort of, so Natasha, you are anticipating this complex character piece. Yes. So two things. I think you're correct. At the beginning of The Lion King, I think Mufasa definitely is the protagonist, right? We think, oh, that's the good guy in this story. But of course, then he dies and we find out really this story is about Simba, right? The story by the end is clearly about Simba and Simba is the protagonist. Now, I do use the example of The Lion King, but not everyone has seen it. So if you haven't seen it, I don't want to go on and on about The Lion King if you've never seen it. But I think it's interesting that you say at the beginning, Simba is the foil to Mufasa. Mufasa is old and strong and proud, and he knows what to do. And Simba is sort of young and unsure and scared. And that makes sense to me. But then I would just add, Natasha, as the movie goes on, Simba meets other characters that also sort of, as he becomes the protagonist, as he does change, like you were saying, we also see other character foils that Simba is one example. And then there are other characters, Nala and Timon and Pumbaa, that sort of, they react to the situation in different ways too, right? So the way that the protagonist reacts to a situation or a moment in the story is very important, right? The author is hoping to make us feel something by showing us how the protagonist feels or what they do in a situation. And then we get other information that adds richness and depth to the story to see how other characters respond to that same situation. And maybe that's a foil, maybe it's not, right? Maybe it's the opposite, maybe it's just different perspectives or different ideas. But I love that. I love that question, Natasha. I think that makes perfect sense. and if you, I'm going to move on to complex too. So Natasha, if you have another question or anybody else, but Natasha was saying, can this change? And this is the other thing I wanted to point out here too, is then we have this idea of a complex character. This is the blue text in blue down at the bottom. Now, this refers to characters that change and grow over the course of a story. It's common for authors to have both complex characters that change over time, as well as flat or static characters that do not change. This allows for contrasts between the characters by the end of the story. Now, again, in that Lion King example, Scar doesn't really change. Scar's the bad guy. He wants power. He will do whatever it takes to get that power. And that's it, right? But like you said, Natasha, certainly from the beginning of the movie to the end, Simba changes just because he grows older, right? But he definitely changes, sort of his thoughts, his beliefs, his actions definitely change as well. So in that example, Natasha, of Lion King, and for anybody else who is still with me, if you know the Lion King, Simba is definitely complex and he changes, and Scar is not, right? He stays the same. Does that make sense? Questions about foil, complex characters, or any other examples not related to the Lion King? Anybody? What do we got? Ooh, makes sense. Usama, does foil make a little more sense now?
Yes.
Good. I'd say when you start to read, just look for characters who are the opposite, right? Clearly, in Lion King, Natasha, Mufasa and Scar, foil, right? I mean, they're literally the opposite, right? They are literally the opposite. Cool. Okay, last thing, questions about character before I move on to point of view. Let's go. Okay, point of view. I've got a really short YouTube video that I'm going to play for us. And then I also have in the PowerPoint, I have a link to a second one that's a little bit longer. The second one's 7 or 8 minutes. This one's much shorter. It's just going to explain point of view. Before we watch it, what do you guys, anybody who's able to, what do you guys know about this already, point of view? Have you heard this or talked about it before? Or when you see this phrase, what do you think of? What do you know?
I haven't seen this, but when I hear point of view, the answer could be different. It depends on people.
Good. I love that word depends. That's great. Yes, it depends on people. Great. I love it. Hero. Absolutely. Anybody else? Or maybe this is brand new. This is good. Yeah, point of view really refers to perspective here, right? It sort of talks about how the reader is understanding the story, right? And who is telling the story, right? If there are many different characters in a book, well, whose words are we reading, right? And what information is that character giving us? We all have a specific perspective. Like Hiro was saying, it depends on who we are, what we've done, what we have experienced, what we think and feel. We have all of those own perceptions inside of us, and that affects our point of view. Well, the way that stories do this is by playing with point of view a little bit here. So good, keep this in mind, like Hiro was saying. It depends on who is talking, who is writing, and perspective, right? From a certain perspective or a certain individual point of view. So I'll get the YouTube video here. Let me make sure the sound is working. It's very short, so we can talk about it after it plays. Sorry, hold on. Sorry, you guys. Can you hear the audio yet, or do I need to fix it?
No voice.
Got it. Good. Give me 1 second to fix this. I got YouTube. I need to make sure I'm sharing sound. And I need to share my, I am sharing my screen. I'm going back to the beginning. I'm turning on the captions. Usama, if you can hear it, just give me a thumbs up. I'm going to start it now. Tell me if you can hear it.
Yeah.
Authors can narrate a story from different points of view. To learn what this means, let's consider different versions of the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet. Authors can narrate a story from different points of view. To learn what this means, let's consider different versions of the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet. Romeo was in Juliet's garden. He was on the ground, and she was in the balcony. They looked at each other for a long time. This point of view is third-person observant. The narrator tells us what happens, but he does not tell us what Romeo and Juliet think and feel. He is only an observer, like a camera. Sometimes, though, the narrator tells us more. When Romeo saw Juliet on the terrace above him, he thought she looked as beautiful as the sun. This point of view is third-person omniscient. This narrator shares both what happens and what characters think and feel. He is all-knowing, like a god. Finally, the narrator also can be a character in the story. I looked up at the terrace and saw Juliet, my love, as beautiful as the sun, looking down on me. This point of view is first person. Because the narrator is Romeo, he tells us what Romeo thinks and feels, but he cannot know what other characters think and feel. The narrator tells us only what Romeo experiences. Which point of view works best for the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet?
Okay. Questions. Does this make sense? At first, sometimes this can go a little slow at first, but once you get it, you're going to really start to see it because it sort of becomes obvious. Questions about this idea of third person narrator, third person omniscient. Omniscient just means all knowing. And this idea of like personal, like one singular point of view. Does this make sense? And what questions do we have? Ahmad says yes. Hirobe says yes, it makes sense. Questions? No questions. Then if this makes sense, the only thing I'm going to add here is what is becoming very popular. And this has been true for a long time, right? It's not just becoming popular now. Famously, I'm looking at Hirobe, I know in film, Kurosawa is one of the most famous people to play with point of view in film history, right? Which is, who is telling, we can have one story, right? Let's say that there are, let's even use this example in the Romeo and Juliet scene, right? Down here in this picture, there's two people, right? And in the video, they told what happened here from Romeo, from the man's point of view. But of course, the author could write a chapter from Romeo's point of view, and then we could also get a chapter from Juliet's point of view, right? So we have the same event, we have the same thing that happens, we have the same action, but we get multiple people's point of view, perspective on what it was. And so like I said, this is not something new. People have been doing this in film, TV, and literature for a long time. But I will say, I do feel like as a person who reads at least English literature a lot, this is becoming more and more popular, right? More and more common for authors to play with point of view, to tell the same story, but one chapter is from character A, another chapter is from character B, and the reader is sort of going, oh, wow, like now I get to sort of think and feel what really happened, or you know what I mean? So that's something to think about. And I want to make sure it's clear because she doesn't do it like crazy in this book, but you do get multiple points of view. And you will, and one thing I really want to do when we talk about this book is the way she writes will change, right? The words that she uses, the type of sentences that she writes, the feeling of the chapters will change because of course you're sort of in a different character's reality. And some characters' realities, you know, are very kind and loving and gentle, and other characters' realities are, you know, intense and scary and paranoid and whatever, fill in the blank. So this,
Biden, right?
go ahead.
Like a Trump and Biden.
Yes, I might have been. I don't think I would want to be in Donald Trump's head. I do not think I would want to be in the man's head. No, I don't. I don't. Sometimes I don't want to be in my own head though either. So, Usama, what's up?
No, I am with you.
Okay, good. Anybody else? So I can see here Usama Ahmad. Anybody who's still there but just listening? Any questions before I move on from point of view? We'll talk about it more, but if the basic idea makes sense, I want to move on.
Professor.
Professor, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Ahmad and then Jay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ahmad, and then Jay after Ahmad.
In terms of if you use the word hearsay, is this kind of the third person, correct?
Yeah, hearsay.
Yes.
Yeah, hearsay is basically. Here's what hearsay is. Hiraway told me that Ahmad said, right? It's
Yeah,
not that's hearsay. Like then I couldn't really say, oh, that's what Ahmad said. It's like, well, you didn't really hear. I didn't hear you say that, right? I heard Hiraway say that that's what you said. That is basically the definition for hearsay. Does that make sense?
yes, I do. I did get that one. Thank you. But when you are reading the stories, when somebody is talking about the event to the other person,
Yes.
I mean, to the
Now,
other person, is this going to be the third person narrative?
yes, basically. I mean, it depends. I think even more important than is it third person or first person or whatever, even more important to that question, Ahmad, is this idea about reliable, right? Like if a character, this idea of who is a reliable narrator, that's again, in a full on, if you were analyzing just, 3 or 4 books, 3 or 4 novels, this is a huge thing that people study when they study literature is, okay, who's narrating this story? Is that narrator reliable? Can we believe what they're telling us? Or of course, there are famous examples of American literature, at least, where the characters are, maybe they're in prison, or maybe they're sick, or maybe they have mental health issues. And that's not good or bad, but it does bring into question, ooh, like, does this person really know what happened? Can we trust what this person says about this other person? So even more than first person, third person, whatever, is this idea of reliable narrator. And like I said, I think as you go through the book, there's 2 chapters that are from one specific character's point of view, and he's not an evil character, he's not a bad person, but you really can feel the difference, right? Like he thinks about the world in a very different way. And I do think as the reader, maybe you agree with him, you know what I mean? Maybe you do, but you will feel the difference. You absolutely will feel the difference. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Professor. Yes.
Jay, what's up?
Yeah, I was gonna ask Professor about the narrator omniscient.
Yes.
When they're like the ones giving the voice for the speakers, could they also shift from being a narrator omniscient to the first person speaking?
Of course, the answer to all these questions is could they is yes. I mean, of course, the more you play with point of view in the same story, you're getting more complex, sort of more literary. So you absolutely can. There's a famous example of a book. What's it called? The Bone Collector, or I'll look it up and then send a link in Canvas. But there's a very famous example, I think, in the last 15 years of a story that was the narrator for the story is the character's dead, right? The character is dead, but the character is dead and almost like a ghost looking back on the past. So the character uses I to say, I see this, I did this, but then they look back on the past and they talk about themselves as he as well, right? So he, it was 20 years ago, he did this, he said that, but he's talking about himself in the third person. So authors can definitely play with this in different ways. But of course, like I said, when authors do that, that means more complex and more sort of challenging for the reader in any language, it's just more difficult to sort of keep up and understand fully what's happening every moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Any other point of view questions? In Canvas, like I said, in the PowerPoint slide for today, I've got another link. It's basically, it's just a little more detailed information with a few more specific examples. So if you want more information about point of view, suggest that video. But just to make sure that we introduce the book today, I'm gonna move on. So recommend the video if you want. Yeah, if you want more information and examples about point of view. Cool. So then, what does that mean for our book? So I want to briefly introduce this book that we're going to go through here in terms of setting, character, point of view, and themes. So I'm going to introduce some of this stuff, but this book is called The Lathe of Heaven. It's written by Ursula K. Le Guin. The setting is a city called Portland, Oregon. Maybe some of you have been there or visited. I'm going to show you some pictures of Portland today because, you know, in some books, the setting is, you know, all stories happen somewhere. Do you know what I mean? So in that way, the setting is important. But in some stories, I think the setting is really important. And in other ones, it's sort of less important. The way she's not from Portland. She's actually from the Bay Area. Her father was a professor at UC Berkeley, but then she retired and moved to Oregon at Portland as a writer. So because she lives in Oregon, you can really feel that she knows the city. She describes it with a lot of depth and detail. There are some specific images, places, rivers, and mountains that are very important to the story. So I'm gonna introduce you guys to some of that. So hopefully, I don't want to. I think part of the joy of reading is using your imagination. So I don't want to force you to imagine what to picture in your mind as you read, but I do think it's helpful to see some of this stuff about what Portland is. So the book takes place in Portland, Oregon. The book was written in 1971, but the action is set in the future at that time, right? So the book is set in 2002. So just imagine if you're using that same time frame, we could imagine that the story is taking place in 2052, because I think that part of the dream or the image that she had is trying to imagine the world in 30 years in the future, right? So this idea of, oh, this is what the world is now and what will it be in the future? This is a key and important aspect of the setting. So I want you guys to understand that right away, right? This is not a documentary. This isn't even like, what could I say? Yeah, this is go ahead. Yeah, Usama, what you want to say?
A mixture.
Say again?
Mixture.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Anything?
I say feature.
Future. Yes, exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
I said it's fiction.
Fiction. Well, exactly. I mean, well, when we read this, we can talk about whether this is science fiction or not. Science fiction usually gets sort of a bad reputation that science fiction isn't really literature. Science fiction is like crazy children's stories about spaceships. Yeah, so I'm excited to start reading this, and you guys can tell me, like, Jeff, this is crazy. This is like Star Wars or something. Or I don't know if I agree with that, but she is definitely, by setting it in the future, by asking the reader to imagine the future world, she is definitely playing with ideas about sort of, well, we'll talk about this in the themes, but yeah, about society, about what it's like to be a human being right now in the 20th century, in the 21st century, you know. So she's definitely asking us to imagine the future by looking at the present, if that makes sense.
A mixture, not future, mixture.
Of what? Yeah, mixture of what, Usama?
Between the present and the
future. Love it. Great.
Between the type of writing.
Love it. I love it. Yeah. If you're not here and you're watching the recording, listen to Usama. Yes, I agree. This is definitely a mixture, right? This is not a children's story about an impossible future that has nothing to do with our reality, right? She's sort of looking around in the 1970s at that time and going, what's the world like? And how can I imagine that changing in the future, right? And you'll see, we'll get to talk about it. Then there's really another reason that I like to use this book is there's really only three main characters in this book. It's not a big, huge, scary novel with 300 characters for you guys to keep track of. There's really only 3 main characters. So the first character's name is George Orr. I'll tell you right now, he is basically the protagonist of this story. There's Dr. William Haber, and there's Heather Lalash. That's it. Those are our 3 main characters. Now, as we talk about this for the next few weeks, we'll get to talk about protagonist, antagonist, foil. We can analyze that together, but those really are our 3 main characters. Now, because we only have 3 main characters, this point of view does come up because at the beginning of the story, you'll notice most of the chapters at the beginning are from George's point of view. George is our protagonist. It is his story. It's about what happens to him. And most of the time we get this sort of third person omniscient point of view where we're experiencing and understanding what George sees, what George feels, what George is thinking. But like I said, as the novel changes, as the story gets bigger and bigger, you do get occasionally a few short chapters from the point of view of Dr. Haber or the point of view of Heather. So what do I want to say about this right now? As you start to read, I don't want you to be thinking about like, oh my God, I have to understand what is the point of view for this chapter. That's not as important to me as that, can you identify it immediately, perfectly? But I do want you to be able to think about, as we go on, when we talk about, oh, this chapter was from this character's point of view, how do we know that? What are some of the clues, right? Like, how does the language change, or how does the author give us the feeling that we're looking at the story from a different point of view? Yeah, and we'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about that next week. But that's my heads up to you guys, right? Like, so don't be scared when you know, after 2 or 3 chapters, if you're like, oh my God, chapter 5 feels like a different story, or like all of a sudden we're in the doctor's office instead of being in George's apartment, right? It's because the point of view is going to change in a couple of the chapters. And then the last thing I want to introduce right now is some of the themes, right? So this is exactly, like I said, like A Map of Lost Things or some of the other narratives that we read. You guys probably know this about me already from this class. I like big questions. I like big meaning. I like asking and thinking. You know, this class satisfies C2, the humanities requirement for Cal State and UC. And I think I mentioned the humanities because I love authors that ask big questions like, what does it mean to be a human? You know, what does it feel like to be a human? What makes us a human being, right? And I'll say right away, I think Ursula Le Guin believes that dreams are a very important part of being a human. She doesn't give us an answer about what that means, but she definitely uses dreams as a way to ask, wow, like, what is this crazy experience that we all have being a human being? Like, what is going on? And what can our dreams tell us about our humanity? Yeah, I'm a sucker for that. So dreams are definitely a big theme in this book. And because of dreams being a big theme, of course, we also get this idea of reality, what's real and what's not real. You know, what can we know and what can we not know? And as we'll see, as we introduce the book today, oh yeah, we're gonna get to, yeah. The 70s, and I'll talk more about this next week, but the 70s, of course, there was this big change in terms of, you know, mental health and therapy used to be for people that were just crazy people, like go to a hospital, lock them up, give them a bunch of drugs, and that's what you did for crazy people. Well, in the 70s, there's a big change, at least, of course, in the United States, of it was more common for people to have mental health professionals. And I think she's asking some big questions about that as well. It's not as important to me that you understand every single theme or that you get the right answer for the theme. Again, this is like poetry, the way I talk about this. It's more that, can you start to recognize these themes? Not, oh, what did Ursula Le Guin mean? What was the right answer to, what did she want the reader to understand? What did she, that's not as important. But I do want you to start to practice noticing themes, right? How and where do themes show up in the story? Because that skill of recognizing themes is valuable everywhere, everywhere. Literature of any language, any place, anything. So I think the last thing I want to say before we talk about this, and then and then I'll introduce Portland and I'll introduce the book today. I'll ask you guys, usually, or think about poetry, or think about what you already know from literature, other classes you've taken. How does an author show us the theme? How do we know the theme?
The detail of the writer, the ideas, what the writer searching, what is his purpose, what is his target, his favor.
Got it. Purpose, target, and details. Usama said purpose, target, and details. Great. Anybody else? Where do we find the theme, or how do we know what the theme is?
It's often being repeated.
Oh, I love it. Here, I completely agree with that. Yes, it's repeated. It comes up more than one time, over and over again. And if you think about poetry, of course, that theme might be an image. That theme might be a metaphor. That theme might be a specific word. And in a story, in a novel, that theme might be a location, right? A setting, a specific room, a specific tree, a specific city. I mean, there might be anything that keeps coming back over and over again. That could be the theme. And what I'm trying to train your brain to do for this type of literary analysis is at least start to ask yourself, like, oh, like this author's talking about whatever. Or I'm thinking again about the map of lost things. The author's talking about salmon, about fish again. Like, what's going on? Why all the fish? You know, that is the type of question I want you to start to ask yourself when you're reading. Like, why is the author doing that? Like, why are they talking about that again? What's that supposed to mean? Usually, if you start to ask yourself those type of questions, you can sort of crack open, some of these big ideas about themes and meaning and all that stuff. Usama, you have something else?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else questions about theme? I'll say this in this book. When you're thinking about the theme, look for images and metaphors. We're going to introduce the book today. The first page really is like a 1.5 page long metaphor. So we'll talk about that a lot. So think about images, symbols, and metaphors, right? Think about images, symbols, and metaphors. Yeah. And again, it's why I like to do poetry first. If you think about, in this story, let's talk about Portland a little bit, because I have another video I want to show you. But last call before I move on. Now I'm transitioning from general information about literary analysis into introducing the textbook. So any questions at all about analysis, literary analysis? Okay. Don't forget symbol and theme, because that's what I'm going to talk about after I show the video. So I'm going to get out of here again. So just a basic introduction to Portland, Oregon. And again, some visuals so that you can imagine as you're reading. I don't want to tell you what to imagine when you are reading, but she describes this city in the rivers and the bridges in great detail. So I think it's really helpful to have some information. So again, I'm just going to play this short video, an introduction to Portland, which is the setting for this book. So give me 1 second, get this ready. All right. Captions on if you need it. Here we go.
Portland, Oregon, a city that sits at the confluence of the Willamette River and the Columbia River. Portland is uniquely surrounded by trees and water. In fact, its original name was Stumptown because of the many trees that had to be cut down to allow for its growth. It is one of the most environmentally conscious cities because of its high walkability, large community of bicyclists, parks, farm-to-table dining, and expansive network of public transportation options. Portland is the largest city in Oregon, a state with unbelievable natural beauty, whether it's the rushing waters of the Multnomah Falls or the Bonneville Dam on the Columbia River or the rocky coastline. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride as we give you a tour of Portland, Oregon, city of natural beauty. Being that Portland is the #1 bicycling friendly city in the U.S., we will do much of our tour on bike. It seems like no matter where you go, there is a bike path. Bicyclists are everywhere. So many great waterfront bike paths. Or ride on one of the many historic bridges over the Willamette River. Portland was named after another city by the same name in Maine. It was almost named after another East Coast city, Boston, were it not for a coin flip. Portland was agreed upon after 3 flips of a coin, which was a fitting way to name a city that has become kind of a free and easy city. Well, that is, unless you are at a Antifa vs. Proud Boys rally and counter rallies. The city at times has become a hotbed of political passions. But whether you are on the side of Antifa or on the side of Proud Boys, you have to agree that Portland is beautiful. You can follow the path that Lewis and Clark took in 1805 down the Columbia River. Today, I-84 rides along this river for a stunning drive into Portland. Or take Route 14 on the Washington side for an even better view, less obstructed by trees. You can cross the river at Cascade Locks on Bridge of the Gods. See the amazing power of rushing water at Bonneville Dam and Cascade Locks, just 48 miles west of Portland. Multnomah Falls is just 30 miles west of Portland. Portland is unique. Beginning in the 1960s, it became noted for its growing progressive political values, earning it a reputation of a bastion of counterculture. However, it does have some regressive laws, like you are not allowed to fill up your gas tank in the state of Oregon. A station attendant has to do it for you, a law that started in 1951. Another great way to see the city is on the Portland Aerial Tram in the South Waterfront District. want to give a shout out to REI Bike Shop and Camping Store in Tigard, Oregon, just south of Portland on Bridgeport Road. I just needed a couple of things tightened on my bike, walked in, and they did it in about a minute and for free. Check them out. They have a great selection of bikes. We are Tampa Aerial Media. We shoot travel promos across the USA. Check out our video of the Oregon coast being posted soon. Subscribe to our channel to see more. For licensing and stock footage, contact info@tampaaerialmedia.com. Thank you for watching Portland, City of Natural Beauty.
So beautiful.
That's really, I agree, Letty. Has anybody been to Portland or visited Portland? Your way? Yeah, I've been there too. It's pretty stunningly beautiful. Yeah, so two things, and then I just want to hear from you guys, and then I want to show you one more photo. Remember, this is what Portland looks like now, right? So again, this type of story, it's totally appropriate for you to imagine this, what we just saw now, and sort of again imagine.
There's garbage great.
There. Uh-oh. Someone's in trouble. And then imagine this sort of 30 years in the future, right? But again, remember, thinking about theme, thinking about metaphor, thinking about image, thinking about symbol. Yeah, let's just start really basic and simple. Like, what are some of the things that stand out from these images? Like, what did you see in the video? And then what feeling does that give you? Because that's the place to start with this type of analysis. So what did you notice, and how do you think it makes you feel?
Relax.
Ooh, Letty took a deep breath and said, relax. Good. What made you feel relaxed, Letty? Specifically?
The river.
River.
Yes.
Love it. Great. Absolutely. River, absolutely. Now, again, remember, yeah, I agree completely, right? I think some of the things that we don't think about every day, even in Sacramento, we've got two beautiful rivers. These things are very powerful images for human beings. We have huge emotional connection to the natural world. So absolutely, yes, the river. Anybody else, any other things that stand out that you notice?
The city, it is motivated, full of activity, because the movement of the water.
Good.
Almost named after another East Coast.
Good. Movement. I love that. Great. So someone's talking about movement, connection. That's great. I love it. What else?
Professor, so when you watch something or when you read something, especially it's like non-fiction or faction or an image, everyone think about the thing which someone's need for that or search for that. For me, I read, so he mentioned for a while, forget about Tifa and Proud Boys.
I know.
Sometimes, so that one is for me. So the things which I exactly I want to watch, but maybe the other ones, someone's if their major is engineering, then their vision is some good apartments and blocks and streets and this kind of stuff. But for me, is at the first vision, it's the river and make relax, and the second one is the political.
Love it. Yeah, I don't want to think about I don't want to think about Proud Boys or Antifa either. Like I said, I'm done. But it is important, right? Again, the setting is important. So it was saying the history of Portland does have something to do with U.S. politics in the past and in the present moment, of course, right now as well. So that is, this isn't really 100% a political story, but of course, the way that she talks about what's happening there is connected to part of this history. And there is a little bit of politics kind of around the edges of the story where she's sort of imagining this city in the future. So that is a little bit there. But yeah, so I love it. Both that, like the human history, the politics, and then of course the river and the forests and the trees and all of those things as well. Hiro said clean, structured, developed, outdoors. Absolutely. Great words. Clean.
Bicycle environment, bicycle, especially the people use the bicycle a lot.
Yes, good. I love it. Bicycling, outdoors. Nat, yes, absolutely. What else? Usama?
Professor, progress.
There is a bridges. It's make the connections.
Yes.
There is a lot of connections.
Yes. I want to go back to Letty. What were you saying there too?
I say progress.
Good. Letty was talking about progress. Yeah, the history of the city and progress and growth. And Usama, you said, for me, I'm a sucker. I'm an easy for me to get really connected to bridge. I agree. You're going to see her write about the bridges that cross the river, right? Bridge. Very famous for the number of bridges in the city. And of course, again, for human beings, a bridge is a very powerful symbol, right? A bridge is a very powerful image for what bridges allow human beings to do. So then again, if you think about metaphors, about symbols and what they can represent, yes, I think the bridge is important. Usama?
Connections, it means symbol to the connections between the people. Yes.
Love it. Absolutely. Great. Good.
That-
Anybody else? Yes.
I say translation.
Translation?
Yes.
I mean, a bridge is like a metaphor for translation. That's fine.
Yeah.
This book, Letty, there's not a lot of translation stuff in this book, but I do love that from some of the themes that we have talked about this semester. Yeah, a bridge as a metaphor for translation, 100%, right? And that's the other beautiful thing about a thing like a bridge, a thing like a river, a thing like a waterfall. These things are so beautiful and so powerful, and they affect our heart and our body and our mind so deeply that they can represent many things, right? You could use the bridge as a metaphor for lots of different things. You could use a river as a metaphor for lots of different things, depending on the story you want to tell, right? Good. Anything else? And then I want to show you a picture, and then I want to go to the book. But anybody else, things about Portland or how this makes you feel, or when you imagine a story set here? Yeah, what else?
I visit Portland in Maine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what it was saying. The city, Portland, was named after that, Portland, Maine. Yeah. Ahmad, did you have something?
Yeah, I was thinking of that Highway 84 along the river. It's kind of historically connects the Columbia River, and it kind of takes you back historically to that time, what was happening. Then brings you back to the current situation.
Love it. I love that. So of course, even that, Ahmad, the road, driving, walking, riding, of course, walking the path is a huge metaphor in all of human history. So this idea of on the road, you're sort of moving from the past into the present, or that the idea of progress that Letty was talking about, and the road is a symbol for that. Absolutely. Of course, a dam is also, I think, a very, very powerful image as well. So yeah, good. Anybody else?
The dam is a symbol to the city that this city is depend on planting. They are depending on vegetables, fruit, bread. The dam make is essential part of the city.
Good. Love it. Good. And then there's one other big part of Portland, Oregon that I've got pictures, not a video, that I want to show you. But anything else about this video before I show you the pictures? Okay. So things that you will see her write about, right? I think in this chapter that I'm going to walk through, the very beginning, I don't remember if we get all of these images in the very first chapter, but rivers, you're going to read about the rivers. The bridges, you're going to read about the bridges. The mountains, right, outside of the city, you're going to read about the mountains. The forests, you're going to read about the forests. Then the other big, huge, powerful image in this whole story is Mount Hood. Mount Hood is just outside of the city. And in fact, if you look, I think we can get a picture where you see the city with, here it is. So here's Portland, here's the Portland city with Mount Hood in the background, right? And actually, I want to show you another picture. So these are some of the highest peaks on the West Coast. Mount Hood and then Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is in Washington, right? Mount Hood is, I think, only 30 or 40 miles, maybe less than that, outside of Portland. But in the book, she also talks about Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier is way bigger and way taller than Mount Hood. But from the book, you'll hear her talking about Mount Hood. Here's Portland. Here's Mount Hood from Portland. And then from, imagine this tall building here where you can see even further north, looking towards Mount Hood and looking towards Washington, where you see Mount Rainier and where you see Mount St. Helens as well. So, yeah, I just want to open it up to you. Of course, this is where you're much closer to Mount Hood, right? By some of the lakes and rivers. But again, just so you can see, you can see Mount Hood from Portland, every day. It's not, if it's clear, you can see the mountain. So let's talk about this. Mountains, symbols of mountains and snow. And I'll also add Mount Hood, Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens. These were volcanic mountains, right? They came to be, in fact, the shape of Mount Hood is because it used to be a cinder cone. So thoughts about this, when you see images like this, what do we think? What do we feel? What does it make us think of, Ahmad?
I want to something. I want to add something to this
Please.
mountain. I'm not sure if that is the correct one. Is this the mountain that native people in Oregon were saying is cursed?
I can look it up, but I'm not sure.
I think I have watched a documentary while people were disappearing in there.
Of Silent Rock. It could be. I mean, certainly. I don't know enough, so I'm not going to speak about Mount Hood, but absolutely, indigenous cultures all over the world, the stories that they told, especially around volcanoes, right? Especially around mountains and places where they couldn't predict, they didn't know what was going to happen. Yeah, this idea about things that were cursed or places that you shouldn't go or different stories. I don't know. So I'm going to look that up, Ahmad. If I find anything, I'll let you know. It could be. I mean, it's like Mount Fuji in Tokyo too. It's one singular mount. You know what I mean? Like it sort of stands out so much because it's just by itself. It's not like in California, we have the mountain range, the Sierra Nevada from Lake Tahoe down to Yosemite, and even further. It's like this one big peak. So it does really stick out. That would absolutely make sense, Ahmad. Anybody else? Osama?
Yes, individual mountain, like a pyramid.
Yes, I love it. So Osama's saying it makes him even think about a pyramid. Absolutely. I love that. Anybody else? Thoughts, ideas about Mount Hood and mountains and volcanoes and all that stuff?
But it is generally, there is a lot of cities in the world related with mountain.
Yes.
Mountain.
Yes.
And there is some story to this connection between the city and the individual mountain.
Good. I love it. Hiro is saying in the chat, unchanging and permanent. As usual, Hiro is kind of reading my mind. When you think about human beings, the most sort of elemental, the sort of four main elements, right, of earth, air, water, fire. Mountains, of course, traditionally are connected to earth, to stone, to things that don't change, unchanging and permanence. So I love that, Hiro. Absolutely, absolutely. Mountains are, they're just there. They're the earth. They're the stone. They're that earth element. I totally agree. I love that.
People
please.
come and go, and the mountain is stand up.
I love it. People come and go and the mountains stay. I agree. I agree. Beautiful. I love it. Anybody else? You will, like I said, you will see. So when it says in the book, Mount Hood, you can imagine, imagine something like this in your mind, because this is what she's talking about when she says Mount Hood, the view from Mount Hood, or looking out the window to see Mount Hood, and the rivers and the forests and all that stuff. So I think it's important for you guys to have some image in your mind about the setting of the story. Any other ideas about setting and metaphor and images before we jump into the book? Cool. Okay, I'm gonna stop my screen share so I can see all of you. Hold on. Okay, so I want to read a little bit from the book and then talk about it as a way to sort of get you ready to jump into the book, answer basic questions about what's going on. So if you have your book, please grab it, have it with you, and be ready, because we're going to go through it a little bit. Usama's got his, and I know Letty already has hers. So if you go to page, well, let's start this way again, like thinking about reading a text, or how do you make sure that your mind is ready to read the book? What can I say? I know not everybody loves literature as much as I do, and that's fine. But one thing I love to do when I have a new book or I'm about to start reading is to really get as much information as you can from the way that it looks. So maybe let's just talk about the book itself. You're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but we can get some good information. So let's see. And I'm happy to read. I love to read, you know that. But if anybody else would like to read and share, I would love to hear from you guys. Does anybody want to read this quote? Well, let's talk about the front cover. What do we notice? Can someone read the quote on the front here? The "when I read," can someone read this for me? Hirome says no. That's fine.
I don't have anything in front. The professor.
You've got an older copy, which is again beautiful. That's why it's not good to judge a book by its cover. Ahmad, you want to read?
Yes, you mean the top?
When I read, just the quote.
Okay. When I read the Latin of heavens as a young man, my mind was boggled. Now, when I read it more than 25 years later, I can't see really, it's too small. It breaks my heart. Only a great work of literature can bridge. So I'm sorry, I can't see the other one. I need to get my eyeglasses.
It's okay.
Literally that impossible span.
Good. And that's Michael Chabot, and he's a very famous and successful sort of modern American writer. And actually, as you were reading there, Ahmad, I do want to share my screen and just show you. So the book of this is called The Lathe of Heaven. We're going to find where that comes from. They're very old, actually. But a lathe is a very specific tool, and maybe I should do a video for this. A lathe is this. It's a big, powerful machine with a huge motor that you use to create things, to make things.
Metallic things. Or
To make what, Usama?
metallic or wooden things.
Yes, exactly. Oh, good. Let's do this one with the wood. Because, of course, this quote came from Chinese. The title I'll show you.
Hey, Jazzercise.
You don't even need the audio for this one, but if we can get some video of a lathe working. Just again, as a metaphor, right? As an image, the title of the book is The Lathe of Heaven. So for people who don't know, here's sort of an example of, here's a lathe, right? You put the object into the lathe, you get it set up, and then what's going to happen is the lathe will start to spin and turn. And as it turns, you can shape the metal, this is it. So this machine is the lathe.
Yes.
And again, they can be much larger, they can be much smaller. But even just to begin with, right, we have this quote from this other American author, and he's saying, wow, when I was a young man, my mind was boggled. It sort of changed my thinking. Now, 25 years later, it breaks my heart. Only a great work of literature can bridge, more bridge metaphors, that so thrillingly, that impossible span. So we've got this image of the lathe. We've got this quote from this author about how it changes over time. And for people, even if you don't have this version, you can see on the screen. Then we've got the design of the cover. What do we think? This is not a right or wrong thing, but like putting all this together, how does it make us feel? What do we notice? What do we think?
There is a flying weird animal creature.
Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
The turtle?
Jay says turtle, Fada says dinosaur, Usama says flying. Yes, absolutely.
With a little clouds here.
Yes. So we've got we've got clouds, we've got a blue sky, we've got turtles. Hiro is saying something unreal, an imaginary world. Absolutely, absolutely, right? Because typically, of course, on Earth, in our lived reality, the turtles are thinking about these elements, right? Turtles are in the sea. Turtles are, we think of water, right? But of course, in this image, instead of turtles in the sea, we have this image of turtles and clouds, right? Osama, anything else you want to add?
No, they're flying. Yes.
Yes, turtles flying. So again, this isn't right or wrong. This isn't like, what does it mean? We're going to find out. But again, we are getting, this is some important information, right? This is giving us some different feeling. So I'm going to go to the back and I'll read it this time. So it says on the back side, in a future, that's what I'm looking at now. In a future world racked by violence and environmental catastrophes, George Orr wakes up one day to discover that his dreams have the ability to alter reality. He seeks help from Dr. William Haber, a psychiatrist who immediately grasps the power George wields. Soon, George must preserve reality itself as Dr. Haber becomes adept at manipulating George's dreams for his own purpose. The Lathe of Heaven is an eerily prescient novel from award-winning author Ursula K. Le Guin that masterfully addresses the danger of power and humanity's self-destructiveness, questioning the nature of reality itself. It is a classic of the science fiction genre. So this idea, we do get some...
This,
Go ahead.
Which page you are reading?
Oh, I'm on the back. I'm on the back. This is the sort of short, just, you know, for any book. What else do I have? You know, these are any book, right? You're going to get some information on the back, like, you know, it's trying to make you buy the book or give you some basic information.
Yeah,
So again, I think all of these things are helpful to do because in learning, when you think about any human learning, the more you prime your brain, the more you have some even little bit of information, the easier it is to sort of jump in. So the thing I really want to talk about here is George Orr wakes up one day to discover that his dreams have the ability to alter reality. So let's put this idea, his dreams alter reality, with this image on the front. What do we think? No wrong answers.
So all three of them goes the same way from right to the left, and
okay,
they should pass. I mean, they have an aim and they move for that one. And
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
Can I add something?
Please.
I'm almost finished this book, and from the beginning, chapter 1, it's about the sea creatures that's swimming. Yeah, but it's related to the cover because the first chapter is about the sea creatures, and we see the turtle is a sea creature. It's flying in the sky. It's like it's a fusion of the sky and sea. It's something like, yeah, it's a mindset or something. It's something in head of their author, or I mean the main character, that he confused the heaven, sea, his mindset, and everything, like dreams.
Love it.
It's yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic, Natasha. I love it. Good. Love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. Anything else? Just things, ideas, question, any, again, this is just, we're just sort of thinking out loud here to get our brains ready to start to read this. Ideas, questions, predictions, anything else that you noticed just from looking at the cover? Cool. Let's read. At least the first, because as Natasha just said, the beginning of this book, I think, gives us basically the central sort of image, the most powerful image for the theme, right? We're going to get some information about the plot, what happens, he said this, she did that, they went there. This is all sort of basic stuff you guys already know, right? What happens in a plot. But you guys also know me, that I'm not really interested in having you read and then testing you about like, what did this character say to this? Who cares? I think it's much more interesting to think about meaning and image and symbol, especially when it comes to literature, Okay, so any questions or any final ideas about like, okay, Jeff is having us read a book with turtles flying and it says that it's about a person whose dreams change reality. Why is Jeff doing this? Any other ideas about the book before we get started?
There is an expectations. Expectations like this turtle flying. There is we want us, prepare us to expect unexpectable things. Yes, there is weird things because of the facts. The reality doesn't help to continue regularly. The reality put a lot of question mark. The future is really going on.
I love it. I love it. Fantastic, Osama. Expect the unexpected. So you look at the cover of the book and you read the back and you think, oh boy, expect the unexpected. I love that. And then Jay just said, it's like saying that dreams can or do come true. Good. So this idea of dreams and true, and that's what I was saying about a theme, reality versus not reality, right? What's real, what's not real? Yes, this is definitely a big question. Again, it's like why I think this book is perfect for a humanities class. It is asking the biggest of the big questions. And that means it gets complicated, right? So as you get ready to jump into this book, or like if you're like Natasha and you've already started and you're almost done, beautiful. But again, I want to take some pressure off of you. My goal isn't that you understand every word, every page, every idea. There is enough in this book that you can pick up one of the most interesting ideas and get a lot out of it. So I don't want you to feel that pressure on yourself. And Hiro is saying it's danger, and it's danger. Can you say more? Can you put more in the chat? What's danger?
Oh, that's Jay said, it's about the dreams comes true. And if it's good or bad, that's why I said it's danger. Talking about it's danger.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. I'm going to go to the first page. So Letty, you might have different page numbers than me, but that's fine. The words will be the same, but I'm going to page 1. And this is only this first chapter. It's really only, 4 pages. We've got 25 minutes. I'm just going to read these 4 pages. You can keep your screen on, keep it off, whatever you want. But really, all I want you to do is sort of let it wash over you. And then really, I really want you to be ready to talk about metaphor because there's a big, huge, giant, like 100-foot tall metaphor here. And I really want to start this conversation with what's going on, right? What is the meaning that Ursula is trying to give us here? So can you come closer to the mic? Yes. Is this better? Is this better? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, good. I'll get real close and cozy. Yes. Better, better. Here always says thanks. Okay. Okay. Chapter 1 of the Lathe of Heaven. Chapter 1. Confucius and you are both dreams, and I who say you are dreams am a dream myself. This is a paradox. Tomorrow a wise man may explain it. That tomorrow will not be for 10,000 generations. Chuang-Tzu 2. Current born, wave flung, tugged hugely by the whole might of the ocean. The jellyfish drifts in the tidal abyss. The light shines through it, and the dark enters it. Borne, flung, tugged from anywhere to anywhere. For in the deep sea there is no compass, but nearer and farther, higher and lower. The jellyfish hangs and sways. Pulses move slight and quick within it, as the vast diurnal pulses beat in the moon-driven sea. Hanging, swaying, pulsing, the most vulnerable and insubstantial creature. It has for its defense the violence and power of the whole ocean, to which it has entrusted its being, its going, and its will. But here rise the stubborn continents. The shelves of gravel and the cliffs of rock break from water baldly into air, that dry, terrible outer space of radiance and instability, where there is no support for life. And now the currents mislead and the waves betray, breaking their endless circle to leap up in loud foam against rock and air breaking. What will the creature made all of sea drift do on the dry sand of daylight? What will the mind do each morning waking? His eyelids had been burned away so that he could not close his eyes, and the light entered into his brain, searing. He could not turn his head, for blocks of fallen concrete pinned him down, and the steel rods projecting from their cores held his head up in a vice. When these were gone, he could move again. He sat up. He was on the cement steps, a dandelion flowered by his hand, growing from a little cracked place in the steps. After a while, he stood up, but as soon as he was on his feet, he felt deathly sick, and he knew it was the radiation sickness. The door was only 2 feet from him, for the balloon bed, when inflated, half filled his room. He got to the door and opened it and went through it. There stretched the endless linoleum corridor, heaving slightly up and down for miles, and far down it, very far, the men's room. He started out toward it, trying to hold on to the wall, but there was nothing to hold on to, and the wall turned into the floor. Easy now, easy there. The elevator guard's face was hanging above him like a paper lantern, pallid, fringed with graying hair. It's the radiation, he said, but Manny didn't seem to understand, saying only, take it easy. He was back on his bed in his room. You drunk? No. High on something? Sick. What you been taking? Couldn't find the fit, he said, meaning that he'd been trying to lock the door through which the dreams came, but none of the keys had fit the lock. Medics coming up from the 15th floor, Manny said faintly through the roar of breaking seas. He was floundering and trying to breathe. A stranger was sitting on his bed holding a hypodermic and looking at him. That did it, the stranger said. He's coming around. Feel like hell? Take it easy. You ought to feel like hell. You take all this at once? He displayed 7 of the little plastifoil envelopes from the auto drug dispensary. Lousy mixture. Barbiturates and dexedrine? What were you trying to do to yourself? It was hard to breathe, but the sickness was gone, leaving only an awful weakness. They're all dated this week, the medic went on, a young man with a brown ponytail and bad teeth, which means they're not all off your own pharmacy card, so I've got to report you for borrowing. I don't like to, but I got called in and I haven't any choice, see. But don't worry, with these drugs, it's not a felony. You'll just get a notice to report to the police station and they'll send you up to the med school or the area clinic for examination. And you'll be referred to an MD or a shrink for VTT, voluntary therapeutic treatment. I filled out the form on you already, used your ID. All I need to know is how long you've been using these drugs in more than your personal allotment. Couple months. The medic scribbled on a paper on his knee. And who'd you borrow farm cards from? Friends. Got to have the names. After a while, the medic went on. One name, anyhow, just a formality. It won't get him in trouble. See, they'll just get a reprimand from the police, and HEW control will keep a check on their farm cards for a year. Just a formality. One name. I can't. They were trying to help me. Look, if you won't give the names, you're resisting. And you'll either go to jail or get stuck into obligatory therapy in an institution. Anyway, they can trace the cards through the auto drug records if they want to. This just saves them time. Come on, just give me one of the names. He covered his face with his arms to keep out the unendurable light and said, I can't. I can't do it. I need help. He borrowed my card, the elevator guard said. Yeah, Manny Aarons, 247-602-6023. The medic's pen went scribble, scribble. I never used your card. So confuse them a little. They won't check. People use people's farm cards all the time. They can't check. I loan mine, use another cat's all the time. Got a whole collection of those reprimand things. They don't know. I take it things HEW never even heard of. You ain't been on the hook before. Take it easy, George. I can't, he said, meaning that he could not let Manny lie for him, could not stop him from lying for him, could not take it easy, could not go on. You'll feel better in 2-3 hours, the medic said, but stay in today anyhow. Downtown's all tied up. The GPRT drivers are trying another strike and the National Guard's trying to run the subway trains, and the news says it's one hell of a mess. Stay put. I gotta go. I walk to work, damn it, 10 minutes from here. That state housing complex down on Matacum. The bed jounced as he stood up. You know, there's 260 kids in that one complex suffering from kwashiorkor, all low income or basic support families, and they aren't getting protein. And what the hell am I supposed to do about it? I put in 5 different recs for minimal protein ration for those kids, and they don't come. It's all red tape and excuses. People on basic support can afford to buy sufficient food, they keep telling me. Sure, but what if the food isn't there to buy? Oh, the hell with it. I go give them vitamin C shots and try to pretend that starvation is just scurvy. The door shut. The bed jounced when Manny sat down on it where the medic had been sitting. There was a faint smell, sweetish, like newly cut grass. Out of the darkness of closed eyes, the mist rising all around, Manny's voice said remotely, "Ain't it great to be alive?"
Very difficult.
Some of the vocabulary is tricky, but let's not start with what you didn't understand. Let's start with what you did understand. Let's go. What'd you notice? What stands out?
Lot of worry about the present and the future. The using of vernacular applications, or there is a lot about the people future, about using the drugs. And
love it. Absolutely. Usama's talking about we are in the future. Remember, she's imagining 30 years in the future, and there's this focus on pharmacy, on drugs, on medication. Okay. Absolutely.
Can I add? I cannot add. It's total government control.
Okay, interesting. Total government control. Love it.
Starvation. Like they lacking food. They feed people like proteins, vitamin C.
Good.
Strikes. Because what else? No, but even for medication, they report people or somebody using some cards, pharmacy cards, and they reporting. like government, total government control.
Good. I love it. Perfect, Natasha. Perfect. Absolutely. Yes, and both Usama and Natasha were talking about what I would say, I didn't put this on the slide, but plot, P-L-O-T, right? The plot is just what happens, right? Like I said, he did this, she said that, we went there. So Usama's talking about some of the things that are happening in the plot. Natasha did the same thing. And I would even add to what Natasha said there, that's kind of part of the setting, right? We're understanding where and when, and part of the setting in this future world is this idea of government, of drugs, of control. Absolutely, absolutely. What else?
I found the introduction interesting about jellyfish in the water, and it gave me a little bit of how do you say? The curiosity was awakened. And I would like to find out why this introduction is there about jellyfish, vulnerable, and like I have the image of jellyfish, not swimming, being in the water and just drifting without his own conscious.
Yes.
So this is kind of it's really caught my attention.
Good. And I think again, I just love the opening of this book. Again, like I said, like Osama was saying, I think part of the reason that this introductory chapter is difficult is, I mean, that first page is basically like a long, it's very poetic, right? It's very, very poetic. The language, the word choice, it's very, very rich, and it gives a strong feeling. But of course, it is a big metaphor, right? And at the end of the metaphor, she describes the jellyfish so beautifully. But then, of course, at the end on page 2, it says, what will the creature made all of sea drift do on the dry sand of daylight? What will the mind do each morning waking? So what's the metaphor? The metaphor is there's a jellyfish, and the metaphor for the jellyfish is what? Remember, a simile is saying like, her smile was like a beautiful flower. Her smile was like a flower. A metaphor is her smile is a flower. So what's the metaphor here? The jellyfish is what?
Is it consciousness?
Okay, let's go. Yeah, consciousness. What else, Susanna?
It is between life and death, because it should be in the sea to continue living.
Love it. Okay, Osama's saying the jellyfish is a metaphor for life and death. Hiro is saying the jellyfish is a metaphor for consciousness. What else?
And vulnerability.
Okay. Anybody else? I'd say if you go back and look at this metaphor again, she has this gorgeous description of the jellyfish in the ocean, and then she has this image of the earth, the stubborn continents rising. So here's where the sea meets the land, right? Already very powerful images. And then the jellyfish, the idea of the jellyfish leaves the water and goes on to the sand. And she's asking, what will happen, right? What will happen to the jellyfish? And then the metaphor here is, what will the mind do each morning waking? So we do get this image, again, even on the back cover, this idea of dreams is so important, sleep and dreams. And the first image in this book is that the dreamer, or the mind of the dreamer, or the consciousness of the dreamer, like Hiro was saying, is like the jellyfish landing on the sand, right? So the idea is, if you imagine a jellyfish washed up on the sand, it's almost like the metaphor there is the dreamer waking up. That's the metaphor, right? That's the central metaphor. Jay is saying, is this the thoughts of the person? Great question. So this goes back to the narration and the point of view. I think Jay is saying, are we meant to believe that this is George thinking about himself? We know that George is the one sleeping, right? George wakes up after the jellyfish image. We meet George. We find out his name is George on page 3, I think. But we have this image of George waking up, right? So was the jellyfish George's dream? There's no perfect true answer for this, because someone was saying, yes, Natasha, I'm coming right.
May I add it? In the beginning of the chapter, there is a quote about the I dream myself in my dream, something like this. And I think Jellyfish represent the George. In the water, in the ocean, it's like his friendly environment, but then the land, he reached the land. It's like something unfriendly environment, like out of his mind. I don't know.
No, I love it. I will just say, if you're watching this video on the recording, if you're here in this class with us, what Natasha just said, by the way, this is all I'm going to ask you to do with this book. I'm not asking you to tell me the truth. I'm not asking you to tell me the right answer. But what Natasha just did is her box is below me. That's why I'm pointing down on the screen. That's all I'm talking about with this type of book, right? Is what images do you notice and tell me what you think they mean? That's all we're practicing doing. I just want to try and keep the anxiety students feel. It's like the language is hard enough. And then it's like, oh my God, I'm not asking you to be an expert. I'm just asking you to think about some of these questions. So I love what you said, Natasha. Usama, I see you're ready. Jump in.
Yes, I see there is, that logic is absent in this image. A crazy word going on. There is confusion. So the dream, it is not going in a stable and calm line. There is a disturbance in the life, and this make a confusion in his mind.
Good. I absolutely agree. Everything Usama just said, I agree completely. And I love what Natasha was saying, right? There's this word, I'll put it in the chat. It is one of my favorite. I think it's one of the most important words in any language. This is here in the quote at the beginning, the epigraph at the beginning. Confucius and you are both dreams, and I who say you are dreams am a dream myself. This is a paradox. Tomorrow a wise man may explain it. That tomorrow will not be for 10,000 generations. So this paradox, right? Two things that seem like they can't be true at the same time. That's what a paradox is. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Carl Jung, another therapist, a psychologist here, but in the chat. Only the paradox comes anywhere near, I forgot a word, near to comprehending the fullness of life, right? So we absolutely get this idea at the very beginning of this book that we're being asked to think about things that might not make sense at first, or they don't seem like they make sense together, but somehow when we think about them, at least we try to think about them, some door opens up for the human. I think this is just Jeff's opinion. Now I'm just sort of telling you my feelings. I do think that the human heart and the human mind and the human soul are so rich and interesting and complex that we do sort of need the paradox, right? We do sort of need this idea of trying to make things make sense that don't make sense, because in a certain way, I just agree with this opening idea that a human being really is so vulnerable, like Hiroe's great word. Humans both are the most powerful animals on the planet. And of course, we know right now for COVID, a virus that we can't see, that we can't even imagine, that before modern science, we couldn't have even known what it was. We can just go, right? Humans are both the masters of the world, and what you're saying reminds me of the Matrix. Humans are both the masters of the planet and so vulnerable, right? Like in an instant, we can be gone. And I think, again, that this idea of paradox, what feels real is sometimes just a dream, or like Hiro was saying, true. I think the idea in the Matrix, if you've ever seen the Matrix, is I love that movie. There's a line in that movie that he says, have you ever had a dream that you were so sure was real, right? And that is, again, we don't know what that means, but clearly that is a thing. That is a part of being a human being. We've all had a dream, right? That really affected us. And again, why I love this book so much is it's not a book that gives us perfect answers. She doesn't tell us what that means, but she's also not afraid to ask the question like, what is that? Like, why do sometimes humans have dreams that feel more real than real life? Like, what is that, you know? And I love that. Like I said, I love big questions. So I love that that's the question, right? That image of the jellyfish, she even asked the question, what does the dreamer do, right? What does the mind do upon waking in the morning? Like, she's asking, what is that? What is that? And it does sort of drive as a theme. It does drive the narrative. Now you're going to get narrative, you're going to get characters, you're going to get point of view. We're going to get to talk about plot and all that stuff too. But the theme here, I just love it because from the very beginning, boom, it's super clear, right? The theme of this book is, dude, humans are just jellyfish. You know, our consciousness is like a jellyfish in the sea. When we're dreaming, our brain is like a jellyfish in the ocean, like no control, no power, you know, like just adrift in the ocean. And what do we do? What do we do with that? What do we make of that? I think that's some of the big questions right from the beginning. Usama, you have something to add?
Yes, there is some stubborn in the nature. So this has a purpose in the telling of the narrative of the story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because yes, as we're going to find out, as strange as it sounds, part of the plot of this story, the narrative of this story is George, you know, I'll tell you right now, as you prepare to read or review, or if you've already read, George is taking these drugs to try and stop the dreams, right? He wants to stop dreaming. So he's trying to take drugs to stop dreaming. So this idea of dreams is connected to the narrative, is connected to the plot. But of course, like Hiro was saying about theme, this idea about theme and dreams in this book comes up over and over and over again. And again, she's really asking big questions about these themes while she's telling this story, right? While she's telling a narrative about specific characters in specific places. So I think I showed you this, but I want to show you again. If you go to live support materials on the homepage, oops, I'm sorry, my bad. If you're watching in the video, don't go to live support materials. Go to course materials. And if you click on the Lathe of the Heaven audio, I have the whole book. If you enjoyed me reading the first chapter, I've got recordings for the whole book. So all of the chapters are here. If you want to read, you can read. If you want to listen to the audio, you can listen to the audio. If you want to listen to the audio while you're reading, if you want to listen to the audio while you're driving, whatever you want to do. But that's where all of this lives. And then I'll talk about sort of what we're doing as we finish up the semester. So in terms of what's coming up or what to do now that we've introduced the book, we've started to talk about it. I'm saying, please, please, please finish anything you haven't done yet. I'm not worried about late. I'm not worried about behind. I'm not going to post a new lesson this week. I'm going to see how much you guys can get done before I see about what lessons to post for next week. So if you're done with assignments in Canvas, just read as much as you can. Next week, I'm going to start to introduce some of the plot, narrative, and some of the other ideas for the first 50 pages. So again, there's no quiz, there's no lesson for you to do for pages 1 through 50, but in terms of homework, that's what I'd like you to try to do. And if you can only do 10 pages, we just did 4 of them. So if you can only do 14 pages, that's fine. If you can only do 20, that's fine. But I strongly encourage you to spend as much time reading as you can. And I just hope, my goal, my dream is that if there's not a big scary quiz about the reading, you can just enjoy it. I just think it's such a gorgeous book, and just like poems too, there's so much to enjoy about literature that I hope that when there's not this thing about a grade, you can spend some time focusing on what you like about it instead of thinking like, oh my God, what's the professor going to ask? And I need to get an A and all that stuff. So that's what I'm asking for next week. Any questions, concerns, ideas? We're just at time. So if you got to go, you got to go. I love you. You're wonderful. If you have questions, stick around and I can answer any questions you guys have. Someone just left. Natasha just left. Bye, Natasha. Anybody? Cool. did this make sense at least as a way to start to talk about? Again, I know it's you know, it's a 200-page book, and there's some, like someone was saying, there's intense vocabulary and stuff. But as a way to start, my goal, like I said, is to teach you guys the questions to ask yourself as you're reading. If we start there, then you can use that for the rest of your life. I'm not interested in telling you like, this book means this, and I'm going to give you a quiz about it. I want to teach you how to start to ask yourself questions while you're reading literature. So that's my goal. I'll just say that's my big goal here. Ahmad.
Yes, I got a question. I haven't read the book yet, but is there any kind of eternal or moral questions involved in this book?
Yes. Yes.
Because as much as I understand, you explained everything about the book. I haven't read it, as I said, but
yes.
Yeah, if there are those moral questions in this book, it's going to be an interesting book.
It is absolutely asking moral questions. It is asking, absolutely, it is asking, I think it's asking, like Natasha was talking about governments and power, and that comes up too, right? Because you're going to see that the world in this book sometimes is good and sometimes is bad. And then this book is definitely asking the question, how much should humans try to change things, right? How powerful are humans, really? And are humans the gods of the earth, or are they a jellyfish in the ocean? Do you know what I mean? Like, and the answer to that question, I think, definitely gives you some of those moral feelings about, well, you know, if you believe that humans are the gods of the earth, then you believe that humans should do a lot of things. You know, if you believe that maybe we're just a part of the planet and we're one small little animal, you know, maybe that's a different thing. And I'll also just add in there, and I'll talk more about this next week, but again, this idea of psychology and therapy, she's definitely thinking about, in America, as people move farther away from religion and farther away from God and closer to therapy and drugs and stuff like that, she's definitely asking that question, right? What do we make of a world where humans feel like they are God instead of like humans need God? That is definitely a big question in the book.
Okay, now it's not more of the philosophy, then it's more of the psychosocial.
You get all of it, Ahmad. This book goes there. This book is not afraid. It goes there. It goes there.
No, the reason I asked, because I have taken some philosophy classes and I love those.
You're going to love this book then.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
The professor, listening to you, it is better to me to understand, and also it is faster than I read alone. And when you read, you focus some time on on points. You make your voice high or low as the drama of the narrator going on. This is one side. The other side is the writer spoke about the problem of the creature on the earth, about environment problem, such a thing that there is injustice in people's life. As I understand from my poem, which I selected, my conclusion, there is a long trip to arrive to the equality, to reduce the discrimination in the society, and so.
Yes, you will also enjoy this book. Yes, all of those ideas. Like I said, this is a book with big ideas. So like I said, as much as you can, I don't want you to feel like it's your job to understand every single big idea. Just find the one that is interesting to you or that makes the most sense to you, and then we'll be ready to talk about that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, there's plenty. And like I said, Usama, I'm glad to know that you enjoy me reading it. I love reading it, and that's why it's all here for you in Canvas, right? I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for you to understand the meaning so that we can play with the ideas. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yes. There is another question. These videos, can we listen to them after the master?
Yes.
Are they available?
Yes, and like I said, I'll show you next week, or I think you asked me this. I think I've said this one other time. Before the end of the semester, I will show you in Canvas how to download everything, all of the stuff that I put in Canvas for you guys. I'll show you how to download and keep all of it.
Good.
Yeah, that's part of my goal. That's part of my goal for this class too. Thank you, Sama.
Yes.
Any other questions, Letty or Natalia or Sarush or Fada? Anything I can help you with? All right. If not, then I will end this meeting. Text me, email me, let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, go slow and just enjoy the book. Read as much as you can. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you so much for your great questions at the beginning of class too. Go slow and just focus on enjoying the book. That's my biggest dream for all of you, is that you enjoy reading. That's my biggest dream.
Thank you for your reading. Have a lot.
De nada. Bye, Letty.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a nice evening, afternoon.
Both. Igual. Usama.
Last
Thank you. Bye, Professor.
Bye, Farah.
About the submission of the assignment.
Yes.
I send you the second draft of rated and also my project.
Poetry.
Mail. Is it okay by mail?
That's fine. I'll look at it. If it's, yeah, I saw it today, just before class when I was finishing grading. If there's any problem, I'll let you know, but that should be fine.
Okay, thank. And I will say bye and be safe and be happy. Peace.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen. Amen. Bye, Usama.
Okay, bye-bye.